before we get going with presentations, Superintendent Webster wanted to talk about some enrollment information.
Yeah, a couple of handouts. Thank you. So the first thing I want to call your attention to is a cover memo and then the Excel spreadsheet on enrollment projections. And I think that you probably have seen this before, but looking at the spreadsheet itself, the top half is enrollments as of today, knowing that our enrollments can change fairly significantly from day to day, week to week, but that's a snapshot as of today. Total enrollment of 5,530. And then the lower half is a projection for next year. And in the cover memo, I talk how these numbers are developed. This isn't a big scientific survey or anything like that. Basically, what we've done is we've assumed that the kindergarten numbers will mirror what was in kindergarten this year, because that's the big unknown. And that every other class we just push forward 1 year. It's a reasonable estimate. Obviously, people are going to leave, new people are going to come. Using these assumptions, our enrollment goes up another 75 students, about 1.4% to 5605. So when we get to individual schools, particularly at the elementary level, but enrollment for all of them, you can see those numbers here. You may find that helpful. And in my book, although we haven't, I'm putting this extra information in tab I. So that's just me. It's not in the index per se. A second sheet that has been distributed to you is the list of priority 1, 2, and 3 essential items. Do we have an extra copy for Madam Chair here? Or do I have multiple copies? Oh. Here we go.
I'm there.
We thought you were absent.
Thank you.
Yep. And actually, if I could, this will be for Mr. Kerr. Okay. So and I really thank the administrators and Bobby for putting this sheet together. So just to give you a little background on how this was developed. Everything that is listed here as a priority 1 item was indeed in the initial draft of the budget. It was in pulling it out to get to the target bottom line that they became priority 1 or on this list. The priority list 2 and 3 accompanied the original budget material, but were not in there. But I think it'll give you a good sense as you look through this and as we go through different schools, you get a sense of what is felt to be needs that we deem necessary, subject to funding availability for priority 1 items, and priority 2 and 3 items are still important items, but maybe something that we can't afford this year, but perhaps ought to be in your thinking for another year. So I'm also going to put that in my tab I, but that is obviously a personal choice. And is there anything else that you know, this is the first of several workshops. Today we have the high school, the middle school, and LRTC. And Bobby will be doing, you know, an abbreviated joint presentation with the appropriate administrator. And as you deem appropriate, you may also want to look at the list of items that are not in this budget, and as well as the enrollment projections. We will have time, and I think we need to make time before the joint workshop meeting with the council just to get feedback, because I will be preparing a budget memo, and we'll be giving them this budget book on a second iteration. So that should be, I think our meeting is on the 27th, I believe, 25th, something like that. Yeah, 25th, I guess, right? So the prior week, we'll be distributing any updates that are necessary. Thank you. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to our Chief Administrative Officer.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
So is, Bill, what you just described about the process for coming back with a new budget memo and budget, is that what you said?
If we have corrections to be made, if we have new information, we will update them and share with you where the changes are.
And was that the practice last year as
Yes.
well? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time remembering.
Because
that.
I didn't want to give this to the council a month before our meeting and have all these changes and then give it to them again. So, and I had mentioned it to Ed when we released it, that my plan was that we would give that material prior to the workshop.
Okay, so they can expect it sometime the week before the 25th?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct. Yes.
And then to Bobby, can we have the priority list by priority number, not by school, and then by priority? Thank you.
Anybody else before we proceed with presentations? Ms. Parks?
Be for another time, and you don't need to elaborate, but I see that buses to cover along Lee District going to Connors have been cut. That's not all buses, there still will be transportation.
So there will still be transportation, but I think that's something the board is going to want more information on. So during the transportation budget, we'll talk about that, although it may come up Wednesday when we review the elementary schools as well. So there is still some busing. It's limited, but there will be some busing due to the realignment, as well as like the Androscoggin Avenue, which is presently Martell, will not have buses. But we had originally planned on providing the opportunity for busing for most everybody in the Longley District if they so chose, and that's what that amount would cover.
Anybody else before we? Okay. So I think we're starting with LRTC. Welcome, Rob.
So before we, can you hear me okay? Before we start with LRTC, the format is a slideshow. It's very brief. I feel it's succinct. I do want to point out that our presentations have a lot of pictures in them. I felt that it was really important that you could see kind of get a glimpse of what our buildings are like in practice. And I'm really proud of all of these images, so I hope that you are as well. So we'll move right into the LRTC slideshow. And then, so we'll get through this, and then after, if you have any questions, I'll do my best to help answer. Rob's here as the expert to talk about the program itself. So we have the LRTC highlights, and this is the slide that actually Rob is going to explain to you, so I'll turn it over to you, Rob.
I guess just a couple of things that we're particularly proud of this year. The first is that the state releases a report called the Foul Poll Report. It's the finally agreed upon performance levels that every year we renew, and we sort of set some goals for ourselves. So the first is the rate at which we think our graduating students will be placed in post-secondary, in the military, or go right to work. And for us this year, we hit a really good number at 99% of our graduates that are hitting either a post-secondary experience, going into the military, or going directly to work. So that's a fantastic thing. Another big metric for us is the rate at which students are successful with their national industry credentialing. So this would be their CNA exam. This would be the AWS welding certification, their NATEF automotive certification, and so on. Each program area has one. Each is aligned to a national or a state standard. And really, for our students, that's the value add when they go into an employer or They are going into a program like Central Maine's IT program, for example. Our students that have passed a CompTIA exam receive additional credit, earn credit for the work they've done if they can pass that exam. So last year we handed out 573 of them, and I should say that students can earn multiple credentials, so that you could, in addition to a CNA, you could get first aid, CPR, AED, that sort of thing. We keep a running tab of the work that our students do in the community, from working at a Habitat for Humanity house, working in our local hospitals, schools, you name it. And last year that number topped over just 24,000 hours of community service for our students. Our national and state industry standards, again, we've worked very hard to make sure that not only does every program have them, but they're relevant. And this kind of flows into the next one. Our automotive program underwent a fairly rigorous national certification process. It takes about a year to prepare, and then they bring in a national team of master ASC certified professionals that come in and evaluate your program, meet with students, meet with community members, look at your levels of instruction, and make a determination about whether they're going to grant you a certification for your program. And I'm pleased to say that as of January of this year, we now have it. Not every program, even post-secondary programs in the state, have it. So we're thrilled about that, and there's a huge add for our students in terms of visiting instructors, equipment, all that sorts of thing that come along with that designation. So, and finally, our CTSOs, our career student, technical student organizations, Skills USA and FBLA, it's the Future Business Leaders of America. Our students are very active in that. In fact, I just came back from our Skills USA competition in Bangor, and our students brought home 27 medals in various program areas, and couldn't be any prouder. It's a real good indication of the work they do above and beyond curricular pieces. And again, it's something that's a good indication of the level of investment both they and our faculty have in the work they're doing, because it's not something you can accomplish in a 9-to-5 kind of environment. You've got to do it after school, weekends, that sort of thing. So we're thrilled just about the effort and investment, and the medals are kind of a nice finish to that and a good recognition, but we're very proud of all the way that all of our students are performing. So with that, I guess I would just say the state of the state is very healthy. We have a very active and engaged student population. Another kind of thing that it's sort of a healthy metric, but we don't like to talk about so much, is the fact that we have enrollment numbers that we've talked about here that exceed what we're able to serve. So students are voting with their feet, as I say, and they're coming to our programs in record numbers, and we're proud of that fact, and we aim to have something substantial for all of them. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight to talk about our budget, and I'll turn it back to Bobby.
So the next slide, we're going to be talking about the cost drivers that are in this budget. So it's really what is driving this budget up or down. And the largest item, and you're going to see this common theme throughout all of the presentations, is salaries and benefits. So those are all contractual obligations that we have. And then there's an all other, there's a small amount that's increased. And so when I look at a budget, I look, is it reasonable? The total percentage increase for LRTC is 3.49%. So that's incredibly reasonable. One might argue out there that it should be higher. And then the essential items not included, which you'll find in your handout that you just went over with Bill, the national and state certification assessments are not in this budget. That's $27,500. And then there's an Ed Tech 3 for industrial arts that's in there, or that's not in there, for $24,000. You'll find that on your worksheet as well. And within that worksheet, that handout that Bill just went over with you, there's a justification column there. So you'll see why it is that we're asking for this, why it is that we need this request. That is it. Any questions?
So if I may, on page 3, it's a top third, Article 3. You can see the two things that total 51,000.
So
This priority list that she gave us, the handout. So page 3 of it is, she just wanted to reference the priorities that were taken out. But, Bobby, what else would you like us to be looking at as we ask questions?
So as far as our LRTC is concerned, this is it. What you really need to consider is it's a 3.49% budget increase. There's 2 additional requests that are not in this budget. That's what we're here to consider, or at some point you need to consider that. And that's really it.
So I'm going to open it up to the school committee. I can see 2 hands. Ms. Cortemash?
So for the national and state certification assessment, it says legal compliance. So if that is not included in the budget, what implications does it have for your programs?
Some of those mentioned there are scaffolded, so those would be some of the secondary credentials that we are able to offer currently, that we would have to either find another source or not offer. Essentially, we'd really have to endeavor to identify only those required things. We're offered to offer a certification and certification per program that's identified by the state. Again, currently, for example, in welding, we'll offer one welding form, so it might be a MIG certification. Often students are looking for TIG or a stick certification, and that would be something we'd have to consider about our ability to continue to provide.
On the, sorry, there's no title on this slide. On the FY20 cost driver, all other $11,316, what line item would I find all other in? I'm assuming it's many, but.
You're right. So it is many. I can tell you exactly what they are. Actually, hold on one second. I got it. So, all other is all of the benefits. So there's fringe. It's not just health insurance, but it's Main State Retirement. It's FICA. It's all of the benefit lines. It's driving that up.
So the entirety of the increase of 3.49% is in compensation.
Salary and benefits. Yes.
Thank you.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the LRTC program self-sufficient? Don't we get the money from the state? Or are we still 2 years behind on that?
It's all yours.
So it used to be the case that we were reimbursed by the state. Last year, this current fiscal year, the state changed it to a straight EPS-like formula that's calculated, and that's how we derive our state funding.
Regarding the assessments for national and state certification, how much do they cost on average per person? I'm sure they vary in amount, but like what would be like a ballpark figure?
So some of them are, it does vary. Some of them are as expensive as about $18 or $19 a student. Others, a welding exam, for example, can be $200 a piece per student per exam.
Just wanted to ask if there's anybody in the public that would like to ask a question regarding LRTC budget. Okay. All right. Well, we're all set. Thank you. I believe next will be the middle school.
So, excuse me, we have the Lewiston Middle School budget, and same format. Once we get to the highlights for Lewiston Middle School, Jana will take over there and talk about those. And so here they are. Lewiston Middle School highlights: expeditionary learning and academic seminar.
So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the expeditionary learning because we just did a workshop with you on that. But that's definitely something that we're proud of and want to continue focusing on at the middle school. The other piece that we put was academic seminar, and although that is still a work in progress, it is a dedicated time during the day for students to get either interventions or enrichments with the RTI, the response to intervention, and lots of students coming to the middle school with academic gaps. Again, it's a time that we can focus on small group interventions with students, and then again students at the other end of the spectrum that are ready to focus on enrichments. This year we've had several coding classes that students could take, and these are not for a grade, just an opportunity to expose them and to get them interested, potentially transitioning into, did Rob leave, into some of the program that LRTC has. We have 2 different STEM labs. We have a technology crew that works on our morning announcements. We have a digital storytelling crew. We had a public speaking, a crew that did improv. So a variety of different things. And again, those are for students who don't need the extra help and or time for standards recovery. And so that's something we're continuously looking to grow. And it's low cost, no cost, and it's fun for the kids. So.
If I could just interrupt, Madam Chair, because I think some board members might like to hear this suggestion. If you look in your budget book on tab G, you'll see a general fund cost center summary, and it is by school or major department. And so Lewiston Middle School, for example, is at the bottom of page 4 of that book, or of that section. In the case of LRTC is only Article 3. So if you go to the detail of Article 3, that is all LRTC.
Where's Article 3?
So if the Article 3 in summary is on tab E, you can see the 3.49% that was mentioned. And did you do a cost center? Well, if let's see here, you don't have on tab G. Was there an LRTC schedule on that?
No, there wouldn't be, because it's all summed up in
okay,
Article 3.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Next slide are our cost drivers again. And so at the middle school, you'll notice, and again, Bill just went over the cost center worksheets. You can tie this slide back to what's in your worksheet here. So in regular instruction at the middle school, there's an overall decrease of just under 1% overall. And then guidance, there's an overall increase of 9.88%. And what's driving that number that high, beyond contractual obligations, is there's some national board certification money sitting there that we're obligated to pay based on whether or not they have that certification. And by the way, that can happen every year. Each year, additional people can become certified. Library services is an overall decrease of 0.5%. School administration, which is the office of the principal, there is an overall increase of 5.18%. A big portion of that has to do with our contractual obligation for salaries and benefits, which we just negotiated. And then there's some, I call it all other, which is made up of, like I said, thank you very much. Thank you. Wow. Thank you. Which is made up of a bunch of different lines. In this case, it has to do with instructional supply decreases and book decreases and so forth. And then there's the and extracurricular portion of the middle school. And you can see I broke out so that you could see that salary and benefits for extracurricular and is up $10,603. Again, we negotiated contractual increases through the teacher salary negotiations, and then we also added in, this is new, we added in the expeditionary travel of $3,600 for the expeditionary program. So the overall increase within these categories is 8.34%. And the only new item in there is that expeditionary learning travel of $3,600. The essential items that are not included, again, you can tie this back to the worksheet, the priority worksheet. There's a third guidance counselor that's not included in this budget, and there's expeditionary instructional supplies, which we feel are needed for $3,600. Bill, you were going to ask something?
So on your previous cost driver slide, you had an overall reduction of 0.94 or something like that? Yes. On the bottom of page 4, it shows 0.45%. I assume this is updated for something. I just thought we ought to make it clear.
In this one, I summed up the regular instruction and the K2 accounts together. In this over here in your book, I separated them. So you can see them separate, and then they're actually combined together.
Thank you. So from the enrollment projections, we're seeing 25 new kids at the middle school, and yet we're reducing the budget? Tell me how, please. So excited.
This actually has to do with benefits, and part of it is making a budget work. It's balancing a budget. So we looked at health insurance.
I just want to say thank you for sussing that out, because that seems an impossibility, but I'm grateful for those who made that work.
Can I just add to that? This was a hard budget, in my opinion, to put together. And I think that our building administrators, along with Bill and Sean, really sharpened their pencils and really took a look at what's needed. I'm going to speak, well, I'm speaking for me, but I'm on behalf of all of them, but they don't know this. The priority items here, I just want to go on the record to say that one could argue that every single one of these should be in this budget. And I think that if you were to ask them, they would agree with that. But we have to, balance being fiscally responsible, but also we want to be able to display to you what the real need is. And so between these two documents here and the priority list, we believe that these are our needs.
So, Bobby, could you tell me where I would find the cost for Ice Week and Mud Week on the middle school?
You're not going to find that cost in these documents, but if you want it, we can create a schedule for you.
I'd like a comparison as to how fiscally responsible they are, how many students are using it, how much progress is being made in conjunction with the fact that we do offer an academic seminar period there. And on summer school, how much of it is standards recovery versus enrichment?
That I want to just repeat back so that I can make sure that I got it. So you're looking for an Ice Week and Mud Week analysis. I believe you had talked about the academic seminar. Are you interested in fleshing out what the academic seminar does or compare it to?
If I may. No, the middle school offers academic seminar, which is time for students to get standard recovery help I just want to make sure that we're being feasible with our fiscally responsible, and maybe we don't need so much ice week and mud week coverage, that maybe we could get that guidance counselor, or, you know, trying to think outside the box here.
And then you had a summer school comment?
Yeah, how much of it is standards recovery versus enrichment? We may have to start doing away with some of the enrichment if our recovery needs are too high.
Just clarify, is that a budgetary issue? Well, I know it is, but as far as like standards recovery versus what's happening in those sessions, is that more of an academic piece or a budgetary piece?
I would think if we're paying for summer school, we should know how we're paying for it. Are we doing it for enrichment program, like we are at the elementary level, or are we doing it for standards recovery, or what combination of the two are we doing? And how fiscally responsible are we being with our tax dollars?
And Principal Mates can update or correct me. So the enrichment that's happening, for example, in the summer, is through the 21st Century Program, and that is a necessary component in order to receive the full 21st Century funding, which also allows for the academic work too. That's the nature of the program. But the 21st Century costs themselves are not in this budget. There are some city costs above that we can certainly share with you.
Ms. Parks? Was there a third guidance counselor at any point at the middle school in the last, like, 5 or 10 years? It's always been 2?
Do you have a question, Ms. Quartermarsh? Okay.
So talk to me about expeditionary travel. What are you guys currently doing, or what would you like to be doing?
So one of the components of expeditionary learning is connecting students with the community and making sort of real life scenarios applicable to them. For example, when they were talking about sustainable energy, some of them went to Saddleback Wind Farm to see the windmills. They went over to Geiger, and so that costs money. We worked with Butch to be able to, because currently we have to do all fundraising for any sort of travel, and I think when it's like a field trip, students, and it's maybe once at the end of the year, they look at it a little bit differently than field work, which is getting them out into the community on a regular basis. And so working with the transportation department, they've already given us some buses in kind, and we just have to pay smaller fees for gas and the hourly for the drivers, as long as we're staying within the Lewiston-Auburn area. But this additional would allow each team to do 2 small fieldwork experiences per trimester right in the Lewiston-Auburn area, which is, I mean, just going to Saddleback alone, leaving the Lewiston-Auburn area, was $2,800. So $3,600 for up to 12 fieldwork experiences is very, very generous on the part of Hudson and the transportation department here.
Anyone in the audience would like to speak? Sure. If you just stand up, we don't have the podium tonight. Just state who you are, please. Thank you. Any other comments, questions, concerns from the audience? Okay. One last chance for the board. Oh, Tanya? Ms. Whitlow?
And this is for you, Bobby. We'll probably get some more information about this later, I guess, but if it's not, the money's not there in the budget, how are we expecting to fund these other positions?
So I'm going to answer that, and then I bet Superintendent Webster will want to talk too. But as you know, last Monday, Superintendent Webster proposed there were 3 different scenarios that you could consider. I believe it was his recommendation to go with number 2, but there is another option where you could consider adding some funding back into the budget for some of these items.
Pretty well put. But I also think that part of this work is not only what we're doing now, but what may come up again a year from now. So you may, for example, and I'm just using this as an example, make note, we need a 3rd guidance counselor at Lewiston Middle School. And if we can't afford it this year, I'm going to make sure that it's in next year's budget. There are going to be multiple things like this. I mean, I think in one sense, this is a very easy budget for you to analyze, and it's also a very difficult budget. It's very easy in that what's in this budget is, by and large, the status quo, inflated by inflation, statutory obligations that we have. Option 3 would provide a little over $400,000 more. And you think about a guidance counselor, and you can look in that priority list. That's $60,000. Now, I offered option 3 so you'd get a sense what would a 2% tax increase generate. I don't make any statement as to the likelihood of something like that being supported by the council, but I think that there may be something on that list that you find particularly important, and as we get through additional iterations, it's conceivable there might be some additional funds that would show up because of we find a mistake or one of our assumptions was perhaps been updated. So anyway, those are just some further thoughts.
Bobby, last year we did a little thing where we flagged something that we wanted to revisit later. Did I get you? Did I get you? Okay. So is it possible to do something similar? Do we keep that list, or you want us to say, hey, Bobby, can you flag this? How do you want to do it?
So Mark asked me to take notes, so I'm taking my notes. So if there's something that you want flagged, just let me know.
So I didn't ask that during LRTC, but if for LRTC and middle school, if there are things that you want flagged, please say so now.
And if I may, so I think it would be good to keep that running list like we did last year. And through these discussions over this coming weeks, it may well be that this board is going to identify 4 or 5 things that you just think somehow need to be put in this budget. And whether it's through additional funds being raised, or it may well be that you charge me in working with the administrators to come up with how could we possibly fund this? What in this budget today might we potentially cut in order to allow that to happen?
I'd like the guidance counselor to be on the parking lot list, please.
Okay, so Lewiston High School, Principal Jake Langless, And we're moving right into the highlights.
So we have continued to work at the high school with pathways, so the students can have a clear or more clear identity on which pathway they're on, and we're looking to cultivate that on a continuous basis. We have a number of opportunities for students to be successful at earning their diploma, and some of those are mentioned here on this slide. It's our hope to keep those full and whole and continue to build those pathways so that students have a successful path to and from start of school to high school diploma. Space is an ongoing concern. We've managed to do some things as best we can. We continue to look at other spaces, but the concern right now is the number of teachers who don't have a full-time home, if you will, a classroom they call their own, between movements and being on carts, or sharing a room for part of the day and being in a different room another part of the day, and also utilizing spaces that we have to be considerate of what kind of upgrades they might need to be used for a space with students that were not intended to be classrooms, such as teacher workrooms, in some cases storage spaces that have been, again, modified to be suitable for students. We're out of those, in essence. So we continue to talk about how that will go. I have a couple of numbers on here. They may be a little different than Bill's enrollment numbers. These were just numbers I pulled from Power School a while ago. But also, we brought Star Academy into the high school, so those numbers kind of sit separately in some of the enrollment pieces, but that's now part of our school day to day, so there's a shift in there. But we've got a growing population, and I've heard that the 8th grade class coming in, I've heard as small as the 360 window to as big as 390 and change. So remember the last year our graduating class was 306 students. So this year's was 380 and change. Next year could be 390. So we're looking at huge population jumps over a 4-year window. So we have to look at how we're going to manage lunches, spaces. You know, if we get more teachers, where will they go? Things of that nature. So a challenge, but we're working through it. Electives is something that you have supported in the past. This year we added the art design, the digital design component. A lot of the pictures in here are from the murals that students are doing. When we talk about how we use space and how we celebrate different things as a community. But all of these pictures here in this pic collage are from student murals inside the school. And that, again, building off of that, electives. We want to add more electives, not just have good student offerings, but because our schedule physically has to accommodate certain things. And when you have 8 bells and you have the common, the 4 core content areas, we have to find ways to build in the electives. So we're doing the very best we can to stretch space connected to that. So for example, this space is what many years ago was a print shop, which then became our vault, which is now a classroom. So just to express the space concern. And then we're looking at computer science offerings, potentially keeping our fingers crossed with private donors, working with Rob at LRTC. How do we build a pathway for kids who want to pursue a computer science degree down the road? And doing so with private donors' support if possible. So we're looking for those opportunities to add electives without asking for more taxpayer dollars. One of the things that we've been reflecting on and looking at hard, and I know Tina just asked a question about the middle school. I worry about that fine line between what we spend on further opportunities to achieve standards and a culture that is dangerous to set as a precedent of, I can just do that later. So how do we strike that fine balance? So we are looking at the numbers, but preliminarily, over 200 kids in ICE, over 200 kids, sometimes more in Mud Week because seniors are making that push for graduation, and then over 400 kids at summer school. We don't do enrichment components specific in our budget. For summer school, it's all about standards recovery. So those are pieces that we're looking at. How do we maximize it, both culturally, financially, and get the most bang for the buck for students who are, again, earning their way towards a diploma.
we're gonna, excuse me, we're gonna move right into cost drivers. So, in regular instruction, here's where we're gonna find several added positions, and I've broken them out for you so you can clearly see how much they are, what they are, and where they belong. So in regular instruction, this does consolidate Longley High School together with Lewiston High School. So in your workbook, you have Longley High School broken out. For slide purposes, I consolidated it just to make it succinct. So salary and benefits, you can see, are up 129. Again, contractual with some of that, but then we've built in 2 new positions, the Arabic teacher and a new math standards support teacher. So overall, that article for Lewiston High School and Longley High School, the percentage increase is up 3.18%, very modest. Guidance, we have requested a new guidance position at the high school, and so that's what's driving that increase. That 13.32% is because that new position is built into that. There's library services. The overall increase is 2.72%, another modest increase. There's the office of the principal. Again, I broke out salaries and benefits versus all other. Again, that all other, that decrease, right across the board with all of the school administration articles. We cut supplies, those types of things, those things that we probably shouldn't be cutting. And if you need a list, I can get that for you. And then the remainder is salaries and benefits. And then the co and extracurricular, again, there's an increase of 4.13%. That's contractual. We're obligated to do that. And then the next list, again, you can find in your workbook. These are the essential items that are not included, and so we'll go through them. There's the restorative practice coordinator. There's a lunch monitor request. And by the way, if you have, Jake, you can probably speak to the details of these. There's the extended day, extended school year coordinator that we're asking for. There's instructional equipment, professional development stipends. There's the main guide class that we agreed to. So there's professional educational services for that main guide class. There's the office of the principal, dues and fees. There's a piano accompanist that we're asking for of $1,300, and we're asking to add to the Schedule B the volleyball stipend. And I believe, Jason, that's a volunteer.
It doesn't exist.
Oh, it doesn't exist. Okay, all right. And then there's student transportation, and then extracurricular dues and fees. And graduation last year.
So my question is regarding to the Longley High School. What administrative positions are there? Is it going to be another assistant principal, a dean, what? And where's that found in our?
So currently we do not have an administrator in this budget, but it is on the list, the priority list.
So I have a major concern about us opening up an alternative program with no administrator in the building. Just so you know, that's a no-go for me. Those are high-risk kids, and there needs to be administration in that building if we're going to open it. If we don't fund it, then I would say we cannot open it for safety reasons, not just of the students, but of the staff that's down there. As far as any of the extras for athletics, there's a place we can cut. I'm a firm believer, pay as you go. It's about time our kids start paying. We don't give any money to our drama kids. We don't give any money to our music kids. We don't give any money for the state competitions that they go to. So athletics is on the table as far as I'm concerned.
I have a couple maybe scattered questions. So we've got projections in one of these tabs for the high school. We often are shown a number of the graduation rate. So is attrition accounted for in these numbers, or retaining students more than 4 years? Is that accounted for? But anyone can answer.
For straight enrollment,
Yeah.
we have both of those scenarios. Those enrollment projections are accurate using today's data, to the best of my knowledge. But there could be kids that don't complete, that are still in those enrollment numbers, but I would also add that we'll have transfers in. Those are pretty fluid numbers, but we do give thought to that. We have a small number of fifth-year students. Typically that's connected to special education, or we try to find other programming for them connected to their graduation. But
Okay.
both of those things are possible.
Okay, so those are accounted for in their enrollment numbers. Are those accounted for in the EPS model and calculation for the ED 72? No,
So
they don't
they-
care about.
well,
They just take the
I-
number.
If I
right?
may, if a student can still be enrolled in school and is, they are in the EPS formula.
Okay,
Now,
and that's
it's the funding for next year is based on October 1 count. So if a student was in the building October 1, they're on the list.
okay. So it's at a cross section of time. Okay, and then, oh yeah, sure. Sorry.
And I'm not trying to plug for additional funding, but when we talk about programs that help keep kids in school, it also puts them on our October 1 count for subsidy. So every student who otherwise would have dropped out or unenrolled, we gain in subsidy when we keep those kids in school and keep them moving towards graduation.
Okay, that's helpful. I think, yeah, it doesn't pertain to the budget as much as I would think, but I was curious since that's been swirling around a little bit. And then the question for Bobby, in tab G, page 5, so looking at the general fund cost center summary for LHS and LHS part 2, the total increase amount at the bottom combined does not include facilities. Could you speak to that?
There's actually, in this particular presentation, there's a lot of things that are not included in this presentation that are here because they're coming in future presentations. So like facilities will be discussed at LHS during the facilities presentation, and so on and so forth.
Okay, so for purely academic side of things, it's a 3.82 increase. If we added in facilities, it's more like 6.23.
Yeah, it's higher.
Jake, for the restorative practice coordinator, that was something that we cut from the budget last year, correct? And that position, wasn't it? It wasn't?
I don't recall. What happened with that for last year, we were able to secure a grant to fund the position. So I don't know if it was cut or if by way of the grant we floated something but then pulled back from it in the budget cycle.
So this position, the coordinator, does that directly impact graduation rate with this position? Or is it
Yeah,
coordinator, what does that do?
So the restorative practice coordinator is working with students and staff and the relationship component. So students want to be in school and resolve conflicts that might otherwise land kids outside of school saying, I'm not going back to that place. So that's the work that they do. I would say it does have a direct impact on graduation.
So I would want to put that on the list of something to revisit.
Just for my own information, can you talk a little bit more about the standard support teacher and where that person lives and how they structure their time and how students access them?
Yep. So there's different ways standard support happens. Some teachers, it's part of their day. Some teachers, it's more of their day, and they use a space in the library or the back side of the library. There's a lab there where students in that particular lab really focus on English standards. The way it's built, it depends on your scenario. So if you failed something, say, a year ago, in that standard support class, there's curriculum built around you kind of reteaching and working through some things to achieve those standards. Some of it is used as Rob is my teacher, and I've fallen behind on a couple of things, and Rob will actually send word to that state of support teacher to help facilitate the learning and then assess it, and then kick it back to the teacher. So both of those things happen. Placements are decided upon by our guidance department. They place students in the sections where it fits in their schedule, and we have a cap in the space. We have room for more. We have more kids in that level of need than we have spots to put them.
How many guidance counselors are currently at the high school?
We have 5 right now.
Okay.
And we did it earlier today by ratio. If we add a guidance counselor, it would bring us below the model projected by the state in the EPS formula is 250 to 1. And looking at our projected enrollments, if we add 1, we would be at 245 for a guidance counselor. Without 1, it's 294.
So currently it's about 294?
With next year's enrollment number.
Okay. If staffing stayed the same?
Correct.
Thank you.
Is it possible, I don't know who to ask, is it possible that we could do some kind of a floating guidance position between the high school and the middle school that would kind of help with both situations?
I think anything's possible. The struggle, I would think, with that, because I've lived in both worlds, the difference between high school with getting letters prepared for college, facilitating students' next steps, monitoring them in their progress and their credits specifically, is a pretty different function than some of the social emotional concerns that you're working through at the middle school, which I'll be honest, I think at the middle school, I wouldn't sit here because I've been there and say that they don't need one, because I think that they could benefit from one. I do think it's a very different position. Right now we have some people that split between the middle school and the high school, and I think that for those folks, I think it's cumbersome to transition back and forth. They're good people, they do a good job, but if we had one in each place, I think we would benefit from that.
Thank you. Sorry, I forgot. I got a call earlier today and was asked to ask about the Arabic teacher. If you could just, I mean, I remember the story on this, but if you could just lead us to how we got.
The Arabic teacher, we've had a grant. It's now, this is its 3rd year in existence, and it's by way of the State Department, federal level. And they've been good at helping us facilitate getting educators, getting them to Lewiston. But with that, there are some associated costs, including living expenses for room and board. It's not an exorbitant amount, much less than the teacher. But as the grant goes, they roll back their support. And we've crossed a threshold where if we continue with the grant, it'll actually cost us more as a district to get the grant and house the teacher than it would be to search on our own. So that's why we've looked to add it to the budget. The fiscal responsibility upon us, if we use the grant, would be greater than this year's, than what it would be to hire a teacher. The benefit to the grant is they help you find a teacher.
So I think the follow-up question would be, is there only one teacher who provides this, and how many years have we had it?
So there's one staff that we've had. We've only ever had one staff in Arabic, and this is the 3rd year we've had that position. And we currently have over 100 students enrolled in that class.
So I think we need to be clear on what the role of the guidance counselor at the high school is. I see there is no 504 coordinator on this one. And from experience, I know the guidance counselors at the high school are responsible for 504. So they're not all just doing guidance counselor stuff. They're responsible for a portion that isn't done. So could you explain that some more?
Yeah, you'll see on the list of requests things that we have cut from this budget, one of them being a 504 coordinator, someone to assist in the office with the management of those and to follow through with them, dissemination of materials, things of that nature. We have hundreds of students with 504s. I can get you an exact number. But, so guidance counselors help facilitate those meetings. They pull the documents, they sit with the families, they sit with staff, they take the notes, they write up the plans, they disseminate the plans. So in addition to their day-to-day guidance school counselor roles, they they also do that 504 work.
Bill shared a memo with us earlier this evening, and it outlines in it the recommended ratios for guidance counselors. It doesn't really, and maybe there is no differentiation, but would, in your opinion or Ms. Mate's opinion, is there a difference between, I think the needs of students at the middle school level and the high school level are very different what they need from a guidance counselor. So in your opinion, do you feel like the ratio being the same, is that appropriate?
So EPS will say one thing. There's some irony in the EPS model. I think it's 350 to 1 at the middle school and 250 to 1 at the high school. And some of that irony is the level of need at which our students are bringing to school. They need all the support they can get as soon as they can get it. I'm not saying our guidance staff is not incredibly busy. They are, and they do have these other responsibilities. But I also know how much time it can take to try to mend a student in the moment at the middle school level and get them back to their academics. It's a big lift for only 2 people.
Just kind of thinking out loud here, but Ms. Quartermanch brought up a good point, and I'm sure Mr. Kerr would appreciate me saying this, but maybe high poverty areas, maybe the 250 to 1 ratio might not be exactly fitting. So something for us to consider.
I would also add, I have a question, and I'm sorry if I don't know the answer through all these papers, but we have no social workers on staff. That's a different breed and helps with some of the social, emotional, and resources for students who come from high poverty, low socioeconomic circumstances.
Pardon me, we do have some clinicians on staff. It wouldn't be in this, it's by way of our special ed department. But we do have some attached to our special needs programs. And we also have, Caitlin's done a good job of coordinating efforts with community-based support. So we have some office spaces that we use at the high school for community-based clinicians that work directly with our students on a day-to-day basis. So it's not a social worker per se in that nature, but some real good benefits for them.
May I? So when you say that they're via special ed, do they only service special ed students, or are they available to all students?
The building-based staff that I'm referring to work with special ed students. And we have enough students that with a designated IEP that require that. So we have those in-house. And then our other clinicians also service all of our population.
Just a little more information on that. In recent years, we have begun to talk about, and we do have, I think we have one at Montello, a social worker, our employee, who can service any student. Traditionally, though, it's only been our special ed students that have been serviced by our own social workers. But if a student has main care, Spurwink and the other agencies in town will cover them.
And are those folks part of the community health-based clinic? Like, is that part of the middle school's setup?
So, Bobby, on the list, I want a 504 coordinator at the high school. And I also want the online support standards recovery teacher at the high school. And there was one other, and it slipped my mind. So if I may, I'll come back to it when I'm allowed to. Oh, I mean, an administrator at the Longley High School. Right, I don't think we should open a school without an administrator present.
follow up on that. So what is the plan for somebody down there?
It's not far away geographically. As it is now, underneath my supervision, we have students at Tree Street, the Lonely Pilot. We have students at the Armory, less now since Star has moved. But we utilize teacher leaders and coordinate and communicate pretty constantly. And if we're needed, we go. That's what it is. We go and make rounds, and we go when we're needed, and we try to just cover it.
Now, are the Tree Street staff helping at all? And that won't be the case when they're across the street?
So we are working with Tree Street, but no one's working in an administrative capacity, if you will. I think some of the reason why it's been workable so far is that, at Tree Street, they're looking after their facility and those grounds. At the Armory, we have the rec department looking after the facility and the grounds. We work closely with them. When it's at Longley, the custodians will help look after the grounds and things of that nature, but we're still going to have to make an effort to cover it.
I appreciate, on the same subject, I appreciate that it's been workable, but can we talk about liability at some point in terms of that administrative position? Is on my list too, Ms. Hutchinson.
And on that same subject, security and safety when we have our students down there. I know that we had that private firm that did all of the assessments, and I think that we should have that done or something along those lines to make sure that the older students will be safe there as well once that, just something to put.
If I may, the LCIP that was approved last year includes upgrades in security, so our hope is to have that completed this summer. Yes.
Mr. K.
Thank you. Just reflecting back to last year, and if someone could please remind me, probably Mr. Webster, we, I believe, approved additional time for a custodian at the Armory because there was additional need. So what happened with that position or the additional time there? Do you recall?
So I do recall that we had additional charge to cover the custodial work at the Armory. That is, all those Armory expenses are out of this coming year's budget.
Just one last thing. I know that transportation will come up at some point in time. Our transportation has been greatly helped by the vans that you all helped us get last year. Rob didn't share with us tonight, but they had a smaller bus that we were able to still use that it's no longer usable, at least as it sits today. And also, in your thinkings, if we should come into some money, it's really difficult to ask for certain things. And one thing that I think that we need and to consider is the volleyball team. I think it's a small expense, but I think it fits with a Title IX need on top of some other things, and that's on the list. But I would mention that again. Should we fall into money, I know that education comes first. I just think that's an area of need.
What do you mean a Title IX need? Can you explain, please?
So we have a certain number of offerings and a certain amount of participation by gender, and certainly we strive for equity across those numbers. And the girls' participation during that season is down significantly. Volleyball. Oh, it's in the fall. Yeah.
what else is being offered in the fall for girls to play? Is this soccer and field hockey? Oh, cross country. So there's a few options, it's just that enrollment in those for female students are down. So you're suggesting that they would go up if volleyball was put out on the table.
It's an offering that many schools in the state have taken up, and we're seeing some good success in a sport that, almost like lacrosse a few years back, it had kind of started small and then grew to this much bigger thing. But volleyball seems to be doing a very similar thing right now.
It's the fastest growing sport.
Sorry. In Lewiston? Without any parental support once they started? I'm making a point because a lot of sports teams don't have support from their boosters. It's maybe 5 people out of all of the kids that play. Yeah. Okay.
So let me ask this. We just got all these state-of-the-art fields. What's the income from those fields that can offset some of these athletic costs? Because if we're going to make money on the fields, they can pay for their own sports. No, I'm just going to go on record that I will not support additional athletics at the point we're at with our kids not getting the academics they need at the high school and the cuts that we've taken at the high school over the last 5 years.
Thanks. So just 2 things. First, you mentioned girls, but is it co-ed or is there a boys?
It's only recognized.
All right. I was just curious because when I participated in high school volleyball, it was co-ed. So I was just curious. That was several years ago, so I appreciate that. Bobby, we had spoken earlier, and you said that tonight would be the appropriate night for what we discussed, or is there another time for administration and so forth?
No, I think now's appropriate.
Can we finish the volleyball conversation before we start something
Okay,
new?
well, let's finish the volleyball. I didn't realize there was more volleyball questions.
More volleyball? No? No volleyball. Non-volleyball. Is it stuff we've already covered? Go ahead.
So one thing I would like to add to the list, just a little surprised it wasn't, but I'm not surprised at the same time. Last year we had discussed about adding, well, we actually had a presentation. It was last minute. We discussed, it was on the list about like a district-wide art coordinator. You remember that? Okay. And it was supposed to be added to the list this year. I was away last week, so I didn't have time to check, but I noticed it wasn't on there. Now that might not be the appropriate name for it, but that's what we had quickly devised it last year. We also, among a few of us here, also discussed possibly a PR person for the district. Bill does an incredible job with tweeting and Facebook and social media and so forth, but quite honestly it should be a responsibility of some other coordinator so he could provide the district other assets that he can provide. So some combination of, because and just to give an example of what I was leading to last year, we don't take inventory of each school and what they have in their arts curriculum or facilities. To give an example of recent circumstances at the middle school, and Mr. Langlis and Ms. Mates might want to comment on that possibly, but there's been water damage. We heard about that stuff. If that was part of an evaluation, we would have probably caught that a lot sooner and maybe had funds to repair some of the roof leaks. Those roof leaks have been there for a long time. But not only that, but an example someone may have heard last year, Geiger has great equipment for some of their stage performances. Great lighting equipment, but no lights to go with them. So things of that need to be inventoried. Maybe there's equipment to help out in other schools that might work out, but we don't have a coordinator for that as well. So that's where it leaned on the arts last year, but it can certainly be molded into something else with a PR person that can help out with the district overview in that respect as well. So I'm not going to go on about this because it could go on for a long time in my book, but if we could just add that to the list, maybe we can discuss it further in the future.
Are you adding both positions?
Well, I say as two, it does sound like two positions, but it could easily be one position.
Did we have a cost out for that last year, since we talked about it last year? Do we have an idea about how much it would
but I don't know
cost?
if we have those numbers anymore. It's probably just like a staff.
60,000 looks like a pretty good round number.
Between 50 and 60 sounds like a good number, yeah. All set? Thank you.
Just a general comment. I had an accessibility conversation this weekend that I wanted to bring forward, and I'd like to request that we have a microphone for those in the audience who are choosing to speak. The quote that was said to me, and I just wanted to repeat for everyone here, I know it's silly that we have to move these mics around and turn them on every time, but if you choose not to use a microphone, you are choosing to leave someone out of the conversation. So I just want everyone here to hear that, all of us to remember that for when we are here to serve the public and their interest. And so folks at home, if we're not using a mic, we are leaving someone out of this discussion. And I don't want to shame anyone, but I kind of do a little bit because it's a pain in the butt, it is. But I think we really need to have this budget conversation be very open and transparent. And so I'd really like to request that we have all of the technology to do that and we use it appropriately.
And you can shame me for that because I started having a dialogue with folks in the audience. Normally we force people to go to the podium. There really wasn't a place, but something to accommodate if we're going to have public comment during budget makes sense. Thank you.
If I may, I think that given the typical attendance for these budget workshop meetings, we could still put the podium in, and for most of the workshop meetings, our student representatives in here, so we could use that microphone.
One follow-up question, if I could. I think we can do that, but we can also have a microphone in the event that we need it, so we can cover it from both angles.
Sir, please use the microphone. If the handheld doesn't work, we can force people to get up and come talk on that microphone. There are options, but it's just making sure we use it.
We're talking about accessibility, so forcing someone to move, these move, right? Like, can we just pass this around? So just.
Any other concerns, comments, questions about either the high school or people who want to put something on the list that you missed as we were going through? I personally would like to revisit the certifications for LRTC. I think those are very important and they help students far into the future.
something we haven't gone into in any detail, but LRTC is now a targeted program. So the revenue that we are to receive from the state is supposed to be kept within LRTC. So the budget that is presented is essentially balanced. Doesn't mean that there can't be additional Lewiston components to it, but that's the direction that the state is moving in terms of technical education.
Oh, Ms. Sparks.
Was the restorative practices coordinator added to the list? It was, okay.
If there's nothing else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Done. All in favor? Thank you, everyone.